Hello everyone, I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Allison.
And this is Nerd of the Week, a randomly generated fandom podcast. Generator, would you be so kind as to remind everyone what word we rolled this week?
The word of the week is king.
King. Here comes the king. That's not the right song.
Nope, not the song.
Nope. There. I don't know what I was thinking. That's fine.
Is there a king? I'm sure there's a king song.
God Save the Queen? That's what I'm thinking is God Save the Queen.
I mean, God Save the King is also valid. I think that's what they've changed it to now.
Right, but I'm still just very used to the late Queen Elizabeth.
The late, great Queen Elizabeth.
Late, great Queen Elizabeth and not King Charles? Question mark? I'm not very good at British monarchy. Anyway.
Yeah, I don't follow the royals particularly. Anyway.
Wait,
you're going over there soon. You should get learned up on that stuff.
You right.
Anyway.
I will educate myself.
Doesn't have to be today. This is not a British Royals podcast.
No, it is not. All right. What do you think the definition of king is via Google's beautiful definition generator?
I would say it is the supreme monarch of the land, traditionally used to define a male monarch. But I feel like in some of the recent medias, we've seen people who may be women calling themselves kings, a la like Pirates of the Caribbean, the Pirate King. But anyway.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to go with today.
All right. This does not believe in gender equality and goes, the male ruler of an independent state, especially one who inherits the position by right of birth. The example is King Henry VIII. That's it. Just that.
Okay, well, there's lots of other King Henrys they could have picked, and also a few like Louis and
of all the kings,
Williams,
Henry VIII is kind of an unhinged choice, but sure, why not?
A lot of the kings are unhinged, though, so
you're not.
Maybe
it's because of the song. The other options are a person or thing regarded as finest or most important in its sphere or group.
Okay.
Like a country where football is king. Okay, I can see it. It also claims it's a verb to make someone king. So
I could buy that. We will king him.
Yeah. So the way they describe it is a little odd, but like it makes sense. Or like in chess, when you get the king, I guess it can be a verb.
Okay. We'll allow it. Mm-hmm. Speaking of being monarchs of groups, this is completely unrelated. I hope you don't mind a tangent.
Oh, that's fine. We stand a good tangent.
When I was just a wee babe, I used to... There was this cow field that we'd have to drive past every single day as I was being taken to daycare. Mm-hmm. And I would always try and find the biggest, fattest cow. And I would say, not that the cow was the king, but that cow is the judge.
The judge?
The judge. So apparently, in my book, the judge was the highest supreme ruler of the land.
The judge was king. That feels like a young adult novel of like a bunch of cows and there's the judge cow.
It's kind of almost Animal Farm-esque.
Maybe a little Animal Farmy, though I don't know that wee babe going to daycare, Allison, knew Animal Farm.
No, I hadn't read Animal Farm yet at that point. That came later. Thank you for allowing the tangent. We may now proceed.
Now proceed with our regularly programmed content.
Which I think is me again, right? I go first?
Yeah, it's you.
Okay, so I know we said that it wasn't a British monarchs podcast, but
you're bringing a British monarch.
I'm gonna make it that. I'm so sorry. I'm bringing Monty Python in the Search for the Holy Grail.
All right, but that's fair. That is its own brand of great. So
yeah, and I bring it because like the first line of it is, "I'm Arthur, King of the Britons."
And who made you king? Well, you just go around claiming you're king because you pulled a sword out of a lake.
Stop! You're getting ahead of me. I was going to talk about that scene.
I'm sorry, I love Monty Python.
It's okay. Obviously, you've heard of the media, so we can do the hot takes instead of just a summary.
Yeah.
I'm also assuming most of our listeners have seen Monty Python. I want to say I feel like my dad was really into Monty Python.
Okay.
Maybe?
I got into it because of, I think it was my friend McKenna who taught me about it, because I don't think my parents really...
Shout out to McKenna!
Because I don't think my parents really followed it that much, but I remember, I think it was McKenna, because she would have the coconuts, and then she would use that to make the horse sounds.
I see.
And I was like, what are you doing? And she's like, you've never seen Monty Python?
McKenna, if you're listening, let us know if it's because of you.
I think it's you.
So yeah, the coconuts, let's talk about that. So kind of leading up in that first scene, they have, of course, King Arthur, who is clomping along through the marshes and fields, but not on a horse, just galloping on his own. And then he has his little like manservant squire behind him, who's carrying like this huge pack of things and also has coconuts that he's just like clomping together to make the sound of
clack, 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 clack. It's so funny.
I was reading a little behind the scenes, and they said it wasn't actually meant to be a joke to begin with, but they simply did not have the budget for real horses, so they resorted to that. But they were planning to have horses from the start, essentially, so it's just a happy coincidence. And that's how everybody who's ever riding a horse, or supposed to be riding a horse, gets around throughout this whole thing. There are no horses. No horses were harmed in the making of this video. However, they're not real cats, but there are cats that are harmed during the making of this video.
Yeah.
Because they're like, for whatever reason, they have like old women swing cats at the door frames. In a few scenes.
Yeah.
Like, it's not brought up. It just, like, is happening in the background.
There's a lot of visual gags that I feel like I miss because I did not grow up in the era that this movie was filmed.
Yeah. Which I think it was, like, 1974, to give anyone who hasn't seen it some context here.
74, 75, that time frame.
Yeah, and I think some context as well for, again, people who haven't seen it, which probably is not many of our listeners. It's by the comedy troupe called Monty Python, which is a troupe of 6 guys. John Cleese was one of them. Eric Idle. I can't remember the other names. I feel like there's a Graham, and there's someone whose last name. There's someone whose last name is Gilliam.
Yeah, Terry Gilliam.
Okay.
Graham Chapman, John Cleese, Eric Idle.
Are you looking this up?
No,
You're just pulling it from your brain.
There's more, but those are the ones I remember.
I guess those are the cool ones.
I feel like there's 2 more. But anyway.
There definitely are. We are so sorry for Monty Python fans. We're not looking it up. I'm not taking the time to do it. You're just going to have to look it up yourself. So anyway, it doesn't matter. They're not called by their names. They play characters. And
it's a King Arthur story.
Yeah, each of them plays multiple characters throughout this, which is delightful. There's, I guess, several just like different scenes, because Monty Python originally, it was Monty Python's Flying Circus was their show. Yeah. And they kind of did just like skits, essentially, kind of like Saturday Night Live, the predecessor to that.
Yeah, one acts and things like that.
Yeah, so this movie is kind of like that, except it's like one story that's kind of all tying it together, which is the legend of King Arthur. So basically, they are looking for the Holy Grail. They have a message from God. But first off, Arthur has to like acquire his band of the Round Table Knights. So he's going around England trying to like get into these fancy castles. So he just like walks up to like the drawbridge and he's like, "Hello, who is your lord? Tell him that I'm King Arthur and I'd like him to join my round table." And so like the first castle that he goes to, the guard is like, "What are you doing with those coconuts?" And he's like, well, they're my sound effect or something like that. He has some excuse.
It's
And
my
they're like,
Foley, I think is what he says.
Yes. And they're like, how'd you even get coconuts here in England? And Arthur's like, well, don't birds migrate? Couldn't we have coconuts here as well? Like, he's trying to make this good point of like,
swallows carry coconuts?
yeah, the guard just like goes on of like, a swallow can't do that because of his airspeed velocity, and he's so weak. But maybe two of them could carry it. But how would the two of them carry it together? And then another guard pops up and he says, oh well, that's if it's a European swallow. But what about if you're talking about an African swallow? And the first guard is like, oh yeah, that's a good point. We could be an African swallow. Oh, but those don't migrate, so it couldn't be those. And Arthur gets fed up, so he clumps away, and he never meets the lord of that castle, unfortunately. Let's see. There's another scene, kind of to like intro the scene. It's like this peasant village, and someone is coming through with their cart.
Bring out your dead.
Yeah, bring out your dead, because it's the Black Plague. And there's one guy who says, here's one for you. And the guy says, I'm not dead yet. And he's like, you will be tomorrow. And he like bribes the cart guy to like bang him over the head. So now he's dead. So now they get to take him. Let's see. Arthur then goes through and they're like, oh, he must be a king. They're like, how do you know he's a king? Because he's not covered in... I'm not going to say bad words on the podcast.
The S word.
Oop. We can say that. So he goes clomping along. He finds himself like in a field, and there's peasants in the field. Mm-hmm. And he's like, hello, who is your lord here? And they say, we have no lord. We're a commune of dedicated citizens, or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, basically, they are free peasants.
Mm-hmm.
And then one of them comes in and says, hey, there's some good muck down here. And, like, what the peasant's job is, I'm not entirely sure, but they're basically just, like, pulling up clobs of mud from the ground and putting it in a basket. And, like, that's what they're doing. And Arthur, like, goes, like, I'm the king. This is the scene that you were talking about at first. Mm-hmm. I'm like, who are you to be king? We didn't elect you. He's like, no, the Lady of the Lake gave me this sword, and so therefore I am the supreme ruler. And they're like, well, I don't think that anyone who's just getting swords from ladies standing in bodies of water should be king of us.
Uh-huh. Oh, it's my favorite scene.
And they say, and Arthur's like, well, how do you run your government then? And they're like, well, we have a bi-weekly council meeting, and there has to be a majority vote for internal affairs, but then for external affairs, and Arthur just like cuts him off. And he's like, but you must have a lord. And they're like, no, we all take turns of who's going to be the ruler for the week or something like that. Uh-huh. And Arthur just can't believe this. Somehow, like, the peasant gets up in his way, and he doesn't mean to, I don't think, but he like accidentally pushes the peasant, and the peasant goes on and like, here's the institutionalized violence we were all told about. Uh-huh. And Arthur just like goes away. He's like, oh, shut up. And he says, I'm being repressed.
Help, I'm being repressed.
It's so good.
I love it so much.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Okay, so then Arthur, he goes on to whatever he's next going to do. Mm-hmm. The opening of the next scene is this crowd of peasants. They're all excited because they found what they think of as a witch.
Oh, the duck scene. I love this one too.
The duck. So they bring this lady before their knight lord, and they're like, we found a witch. And they're like, he says, how do you know that she's a witch? And they say, she looks like a witch. She dresses like a witch. And the lady says, they dressed me up like this. And this isn't my nose. It's a false nose. Mm-hmm. They like tied a rhubarb or carrot or something to her face. Mm-hmm. And he lifts the nose up and he says, oh, okay, yeah. Huh? And then one of the peasants offers up like, she turned me into a newt. And everyone like looks at him. I got better. He's obviously not a newt. It got better. Also, this is kind of silly. I have a friend from undergrad who doesn't... Okay, the peasant who got turned into a newt is John Cleese.
Yep.
My friend does not look like John Cleese, but he does look like this peasant. Like with the specific makeup and like hat that it's wearing, they look very similar. So I always get a kick out of that. That's beside the point, though. So anyway, then the knight, he says, like, well, we can't just assume that she's a witch. We have to test it with scientific principles. You know, he's enlightened, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So he says, so what do we do with witches? And the peasants get all excited. They're like, we burn them. He's like, yes, yes. And what else do we burn? And they say, more witches. And they say, no, no, no. What else? And they're like, oh, we burn wood. He's like, yes, yes, we burn wood. Now, what else does wood do? And they're a bit confused, but they figure it out. It's that wood floats. And he says, all right, so what else floats? And, all right, first off, they have to say, somehow they came to the conclusion that witches are made of wood then.
Yes.
Which is why they burn. Okay. Sorry, I skipped that part. Anyway, so now we're to wood floats. They're like, so what else floats? And boy, they are stumped. They do not know what else
Tiny
floats.
rocks.
Yes. Tiny rocks, which I don't know why they would think tiny rocks
Tiny
float.
rocks don't float.
I've never seen a tiny rock float. Maybe if you had like real good surface tension, it was a real tiny rock. But
Or like a really porous rock, maybe.
yeah,
But, yeah.
like it'd have to be some real special circumstances. But anyway, and then King Arthur has kind of come up upon the scene, and he says, a duck. And the knight looks over at him and he's like, yes, kind sir, a duck, you're right. He's very impressed. But he goes back to his peasants, because he's teaching them things. He seems like a very good lord. He's very kind to his peasants. Anyway.
Maybe a little misguided, but he's trying.
He's trying. He's trying more than they were.
That's true.
So he says, so a duck floats. So therefore, and the peasants figure it out that if she weighs as much as a duck, then she's a witch and they can burn her. So they take her over to the set of scales that like basically a human can sit on. And then there's like a cage for the duck. And the way they let it go from like its balances, you know how if you've ever seen a scale with balances, it kind of wiggles back and forth before it reaches equilibrium.
Yeah.
So they don't let it reach equilibrium. They let it balance, and when they see that she's heavier than a duck, or no, lighter than a duck, they say she's a witch, and they take her off to be burned. King Arthur, he comes up and speaks to the knight, and the knight says, who are you who is so wizened in the ways of science? And Arthur is like, I am your king. Would you like to join me at the round table? And of course he does. And so he is knighted as a knight of the round table, and they go off on their merry way. And then they don't show us how they collect all the other guys, because I think it would take too long, which is fine. But basically they have, so it's Sir Bedivere was the science guy.
Yep.
Then we have Sir Robin, who is not so brave. There's, of course, Sir Lancelot, who is very brave. And then Sir Galahad.
Yeah, the pure. Yeah.
So they are the Knights of the Round Table with Arthur. And they go off to Camelot. So they see Camelot in the distance. Apparently, the castle that they were going to film the Camelot scene at took away their rights to film there at the last minute. So they have just like this paper model somehow like in the background, and Arthur says, behold, the great Camelot. And his squire says, it's just the model. Like in the scene. And then they cut to the inside of what is Camelot, apparently. And it's just like these knights, and they sing a song called We're Knights of the Round Table. And it's all sorts of rhyming and jesting and good fun. And then at the end of the song, it cuts back to Arthur with his new knights, and he says, on second thought, let's not go to Camelot. It's just a silly place.
Yeah.
So they don't actually go to Camelot. And that's when they get their message from God that they must find the Holy Grail.
Holy Grail.
The Holy Grail. And they decide at first that they're going to split up. So then there's the adventures of each of them and kind of what befalls them all. I'm not sure. I don't remember which order they come in, so I'm just going to talk at you
the next
and hope
one's
it's the right.
The French soldier.
Oh, yes. This is before they decide to split up, actually, then.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so first off, they go to they're going through and they find a castle and they're like, we need some shelter for the night, and then if your lord so wishes, he can join us on this search. And it's the French soldiers, and they say, what are you doing in Britain? And they say, it's none of your business. And they're just not letting him in. First off, he says, we're searching for the Holy Grail, if your lord would like one as well. And they say, we already have one. It's very nice. And they think that's terribly funny that they've already got one, even though obviously they don't. And then they start just like making fun of King Arthur. They're like, we fart in your general direction. Your mother was a hamster and your father smelt of elderberries.
Uh-huh. I say that like all the time.
It's just like kind of benign insults.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Like, and Arthur's just like real offended by all of it. So they go away, and Sir Bedivere has an idea. They make this like Trojan rabbit, basically, that gets wheeled up to the door frame. The French like poke their head out and they say, oh, it's a present. Let's take it inside. So they take it inside. Then Bedivere and them all are hiding in the bushes, and Arthur says, okay, so now what? And Bedivere's like, well, now we all will jump out of the rabbit and we'll fight them and we'll take over. But then they realize like, oh, but we're not in the rabbit, we're in the bushes. So that plan didn't work. And then the French throw the rabbit over the top of the castle and it smushes one of the squires. Uh-huh. And they all run away. And that's when they decide that maybe they should split up and try and find the Grail on their own. Mm-hmm. Yes. So I guess, as I said, I don't remember which order it all comes in here, so I'm just going to talk at you. I think, actually, Sir Robin, he's the first one. So he travels with his minstrels, and they're like, this is the tale of brave Sir Robin. And they're like, he was not afraid to die in awful ways, like to be eviscerated, have his head cut off, and his limbs cut off. Concerned. Yeah, and eventually he's just like, stop singing. Like, he did not anticipate this. And all the while, they're passing like these signposts that are like, to certain danger, or back to Camelot.
Yeah.
And he goes towards the certain danger. And then they come upon this 3-headed giant. And the giant's like, who are you? And his minstrels are like, it's his brave Sir Robin. And he's like, oh, no. I'm no one, really. Yeah, no one at all, just passing through. And they're like, and what do you want to do? And the minstrels are like, to fight. And he's like, no. I just want to pass through. Nothing to see here. And the giant decides that they're going to kill him, but first they argue amongst themselves about how to kill them and what they're going to do afterwards. And Sir Robin runs away, and the minstrels sing about that. And he's like, no, I didn't run away. Like, he tries to make it sound like he is brave, but he is certainly not.
Sir Not So Brave.
Yes. So that was the tale of Sir Robin. He did not find the Grail. Then I think Sir Galahad is next.
I think
potentially.
Because he goes to the castle, right?
Yes. He sees a hologram of the Grail showing up into the sky, basically. And he's like, I found it. So he goes up to this castle, and it's raining and dark outside. And they open the door, and these beautiful ladies answer. And they're like, oh, my, what a poor, lonely traveler. You must come inside. And there's been a grave misunderstanding that it's not, in fact, that they have the Grail, but just that their beacon signal looks like the Grail, and they're so naughty and they have to be punished. And basically it's like Sir Galahad the Pure, he at first didn't realize what was going on, but then they're all like, no, you have to punish us all. And I guess he doesn't realize what's going on, but he's into it. But then his squire comes busting and he's like, no, Sir Galahad, you can't do it. You can't. You must come with me. And so he also does not get the Grail, unfortunately. And he also doesn't get the girl. No Grails or girls.
Yeah. Sad.
Yeah. Then who's next? I think Lancelot might be next.
I think so.
We're going to talk about him.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah. So the scene opens up with a lord lecturing his son who's about to be married. And he's like, you must marry this lady because she has large tracts of land because we live in a swamp. Like, their castle is basically built on a swamp, essentially. And the son's like, but I didn't want to get married, father.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the father's like, well, what do you want? And he looks out the window, and there's, like, a swell of violin music. He's like, I want to sing. And his father, like, comes and, like, looks at the camera, and he's like, no, none of that while I'm here.
None of that.
Like, breaking
none of that.
the fourth wall. It's really good.
Oh, God. Fourth wall jokes are my favorite.
I know. I love it. And then there's, like, these two guards that the father posts. He's like, don't let him leave this room because he's a flight risk. And I need him to get married. And the guards are like, okay, so we'll stay in the room and we won't let him out. And he's like, until I come and get him. He's like, yes. So we'll let him out and you'll come and get him after we let him out. And, like, just the guards do not have the understanding of what this lord is wanting them to do. And just, like, this whole roundabout of, like, yeah, they seem like they're going to get it, but every time they, like, do the, like, confirm to me you know what I've said, they say it completely wrong. Finally, the lord just up and leaves and hopes that things are going to be okay. The little boy... The little man, I don't know. The guy.
He's a
who's
young
gonna get
man,
married.
I think.
A young boy. He takes a bow and arrow and, like, writes a letter and, like, shoots it out of the window on his bow and arrow. It impales poor Sir Lancelot's squire.
Oh, no.
And Lancelot's, oh, no, my dear squire, I must go on without you. And the squire, like, actually had some armor on. He's like, oh, wait, no, actually, I'm feeling better now. I think I can go with you. And Lancelot's like, no, you stay here. You're dead. You're dead now. He just, like, leaves his poor squire there, like, leaving him for dead, even though he's perfectly fine. Whatever. So he gets up to the castle, and the note is basically like, come rescue me, I'm in the tallest tower. And so he thinks it's, like, some damsel in distress. He breaks through the wedding party. He, like, stabs all the wedding guests, including the bride's father. And, like, I think he stabs the bride as well. She's not dead yet. Oh my God, I missed a scene. I'll finish Lancelot and we'll go back to it.
Okay.
So basically he gets up to the tower and he finds this man instead of the damsel. And he's like, oh, this isn't what I was expecting. He's, like, trying to leave. But then the Lord comes in and he's like, oh, you're a knight of the round table, though. So, like, we can just have you on our side. And now that the bride's husband now that the bride's father is dead, that means that she is legally under my care. He, like, makes this up on the spot.
Right.
And so, therefore, I'm her father, and she can marry you, and then we can benefit from your wealth. And Lancelot just is not having any of this. And I think he ends up just, like, stabbing the whole party again.
Yeah, I think he slaughters, like, the
away.
entire wedding party.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's Lancelot, and he goes off to find King Arthur again. The scene that we missed, that is also iconic, Arthur is going through the woods to find some people, and he comes across the Black Knight.
Oh, yeah, the Black Knight.
Yeah. So he's like, do you want to join my party? And the Black Knight doesn't respond. He's like, okay, you're weird. We're just going to leave now. And the Black Knight's then like, none shall pass. He's like, I just want to go across the bridge, please. So they get into a fight with the Black Knight. And Arthur is better than him at fighting. And so he, like, takes his arm off. And he's like, all right, then. So let us pass now. I won the fight. And the Black Knight's like, no. We're still going. And Arthur's like, your arm is off. You can't fight. And he, like, keeps fighting.
It's just
his other
flesh
arm
wounds.
comes off. Yeah, just I completely forgot that line. But yeah, it's just a flesh wound. And then, like, his legs come off. Apparently for, like, part of the scene, they had found, like, a one-legged blacksmith in the town that they were filming in and had him, like, stand in for, like, 2 seconds of the scene.
Oh, nice.
While they took off the one fake leg. And then they had to use a mannequin to take off the other one. It's like, you're gonna take legs off mannequins anyway. Why did you need to get a poor soul in here for, like, 2 minutes of filming?
So he could say he was in the movie.
I guess so. Whatever. Anyway, so his legs and his arms are off, and he's just, like, sitting there. He's like, this isn't over yet. You're running. You're surrendered. And Arthur's like, I definitely have won, sir. So that's the last we see of the Black Knight. I just wanted to bring that up because it has the iconic.
I
it's
was
just a flesh
wondering,
wound.
I was like, I don't remember where he is in this movie, but I feel like we've missed
It was
him.
actually at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so sorry I missed him. I feel like a lot of the iconic lines are towards the beginning, actually.
Yeah, and isn't it at the beginning too? There's like a documentary crew that like is
Oh, yes.
following
I
them.
completely.
Yeah.
It's like it's kind of like spliced in between some scenes of like modern day.
Yeah.
And it looks like some historian is like in front of some ruins, and he's like, but King Arthur was taunted by the French, and it was greatly disappointing for him, but it didn't deter him from his quest, or something like that.
Yeah.
And then like some random knight just like comes by and slices his throat open.
Yeah.
And his poor wife like comes running out like, oh my gosh, you're dead. And then we just kind of like see them as like little spliced scenes throughout.
Yeah.
But it's not exactly clear if it's happening at the same time as the rest of the movie at this point. Eventually, they all get together, and they have to go find this sorcerer, because he knows where the writing is that says where the Grail's last resting place was.
Yep.
Bit convoluted. So it's the great sorcerer, Tim.
Oh yeah,
And-
Tim.
And he can like make fire basically like the whole time he's having a conversation with them.
Yeah.
He like just makes fireballs and then like comes back to talking, and they're like, so we can see that you're obviously very busy, but could you help us? And he like makes a fireball, and he's like, I suppose so. And he takes them to this cave where apparently there's a terrible beast, a fearsome beast that none shall pass. And it's bloodied 1,000 men. And this little bunny comes jumping out of the cage, which apparently, again, from my behind the scenes that I was reading about, they used a real bunny for some of it and then a puppet bunny for other parts of it, obviously, for like the fighting parts.
Yeah.
But the real bunny, they had to stain with a red stain to make it look like it had gotten blood. And they thought it was a washable stain for animals. It was not washable, and the bunny's owner was on set, and they couldn't wash it off.
Oh, no.
And apparently he was furious.
Oh, I bet.
So this poor bunny was like stained red or pink for quite some time, it sounds like. It was still like non-toxic. They weren't like poisoning the bunny.
The bunny was
but-
just not the color he was supposed to be.
Yeah. He was a sad bunny for a second.
With
So-
John Cleese, with Tim the Enchanter, he was supposed to have some like ridiculously long name, and that's like actually on the piece of paper because he couldn't remember it. And so then he's like, I am, and he looks at the paper, and then he just like, Tim, because he just didn't want to come up with this name again, and they thought it was so funny that they just kept him as Tim the Enchanter.
Yes. And, you know, I think that's kind of like the origin of like dumb names in D&D. Is like, yeah, it's this like great and powerful wizard, Tim.
Frank.
Yeah, so anyway, he leads them to this cave, and they're like, we can take him. They send in like one of their squires first, and they are destroyed by the rabbit immediately. Gosh, I don't what happens? Something happens where they decide like, we can take him anyway, don't worry. So they go rushing in.
Look at the bones. It's the look at the bones scene. We can't go in there.
Yeah.
Look at the bones. And then they're like, no, we can take him. And they like go charging in.
Yeah, and the rabbit like kills off all of their squire party. Luckily, they all make it out alive and into the cave. Oh, wait. I remember what it was. They say we can throw the holy hand grenade at it.
Oh, right.
So they've been traveling with this priest who's been keeping this holy hand grenade for them. And it looks like some little like orb kind of thing that the British monarchy has when they're coronated. I don't know what that thing is called.
Unclear.
You know what I'm talking about, though?
Yeah.
They like have like their scepter and their orb.
Yeah.
But they have this thing, and they're like, and read us the verses of how to use it. And it's like this very biblical sounding, like, and the angel came down upon them and said, and lo, there is the holy hand grenade, and you shall grasp the top of it, and then count to 1, 2, 3, but no more than 3, and no less than 3 either.
5 is no good.
5 is right out.
5 is right out. That's the line.
And then throughout this whole scene, it's kind of like a joke of like King Arthur can't count, and so he goes like 1, 2, 5, and they're like 3.
3.
And he's like, yes, 3. So he messes it up anyway, but it still works. So they throw the holy hand grenade in and defeat the were-rabbit, basically. And they're able to get into the cave. So they go in with their priest, and he's able to read the writing of where this grail is, and it is in the castle. Ah! And they're like, what do you mean by ah? And they're like, he must have died while writing it. And they're like, he was chiseling into the stone. If he was dying, I don't think he'd bother to write out ah. He's like, well, that's what it says. I don't know what to tell you. And then right then, the black beast comes out of the cave, which it's actually like a cartoon.
Yeah. That
was one of the things with the Monty Python is like they were amplified with the cartoon drawings, essentially. So this chases them through the cave, but they make it out alive, and it's fine.
Because the animator, like, died of a heart attack or something, right?
Yes, that's why. That is how the beast was defeated, is it just ceased to exist. In real life, the animator did not die of a heart attack.
Fine.
I think that's
just a joke.
I think that was Terry Gilliam.
Yeah.
But anyway, yes. So then they make it out, and they're like, okay, we have to go to this bridge, because that will take us to this castle. So they go to this bridge, and there's like an enchanter there as well, and they have to answer these questions to get across the bridge. So the first questions are like, what is your name? What is your quest? And what is your favorite color?
What is your favorite color?
Blue. And so whoever went first, I think it was Lancelot, I don't remember. He gets to go first. So he goes across the bridge. Then the next person goes, and
I think it's Robin.
like, what is your... I think it is Robin. Poor Robin. Yeah. So it's like, what is your name? What is your quest? And then the final question is, what is the capital of Portugal? Or something like that. And he's like, I don't know that. And he gets thrown off the bridge. But then, I mean, they all have to keep going. No one else has no one else has difficult questions.
Arthur gets airspeed.
No, there's one before Arthur. Hold on. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. I think it was... I don't remember who it was, but they said,
fails an easy question.
What's your favorite color? Yeah. And he's like, blue. Wait, no, it's yellow. Yeah. And he gets thrown off the bridge.
Because
he didn't know his own favorite color.
Yeah.
And then Arthur, this is when he gets the question of, what's the airspeed velocity of a flying swallow? And he specifies, well, African or European. Bringing back that nice callback from the beginning. And then Chanter's like, oh, I don't know. And he gets thrown off the bridge, so Arthur is free to pass. So he passes over the bridge. Then there's like this dramatic scene. They're on some beautiful lake in the middle of nowhere in Britain. And they find this beautiful boat that's like waiting for them to go to this castle that's in the middle of the lake. And they get there and they're like, this is it. We shall finally find the Grail. And then the French soldiers are back there. Like the same ones who taunted them before. And they're like, what are you even doing here? And they're like, it's none of your business. And they throw vegetables and things back on them. So they don't, unfortunately, get the Grail. So they sadly go back to land. Well, and when they get there, there's police vehicles. And they are arrested because it was actually taking place in the same time as when the historian was brutally cut down. And they're like, ma'am, are these the people who killed your husband? And she's like, oh, it must be. It looks certainly like them. And so these poor people all get arrested for killing this poor historian. And that's the end.
Oh, it's so good, though. It's so funny.
It really is.
The quotes are a consistent part of my life, even to this day.
I feel like they're a lot of people's vocabulary.
Yeah.
I hear them often.
Especially in a certain generation. We're just very attuned to it. Now I want to watch Monty Python again.
You can.
And I will.
So that's all I have to say regarding kings today.
All right, I love it.
Also, I kind of thought this might have been one that we did the same thing. I had in the back of my head like
very
close. Monty Python.
When you said Monty Python, I was this close to picking it too.
I had that in the back of my head like this could be the one. There's another thing that I'm thinking of that I'm kind of guessing you might be bringing as well. So We'll see if I'm correct.
Okay. First, I have a quote for you.
Please give it to me.
All right.
I'm waiting.
I hope you know it. From the ashes a fire shall be awoken, a light from the shadow shall spring. Renewed shall be the blade that was broken, the crownless again shall be king.
Ooh. I think I do know it, but I have to think about it.
Okay, so you think about it. Listener, if you know, feel free to reach out to us on various forms of social media. We have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. Twitter is now X. TikTok, and let us know what the quote is from. And then I don't know that what I'm bringing you're aware of.
Oh, okay. Then it's not the thing that I thought you were bringing.
Yeah. What did you think I was bringing?
I thought you were bringing Game of Thrones.
Okay, that's fair. It's actually kind of similar to Game of Thrones. It is a book.
Okay.
It's called Warbreaker.
Okay, I do know about this because you told me about it.
Yeah.
You were reading it while we were traveling.
Yep. Mm-hmm. This is another book. It's by Brandon Sanderson, who is one of my favorite authors, and another influence from McKenna, who got me to read a lot
McKenna! This is a shout out to you. This is your episode.
McKenna is king. But yeah, so Brandon Sanderson is a prolific writer. Holy crap. This man writes so many books, and then he got some he was bored and he wrote extra books, and it was the secret project that he's just been publishing recently on top of all the other books. In fact, I wish, because Brandon Sanderson finished the Wheel of Time series when Robert Jordan passed away.
Oh.
And I wish he would just take Game of Thrones from George R.R. Martin and finish it.
Yeah, I was going to say.
We will never get it ended. And then if Sanderson gets it, we'll have the ending by next Tuesday. So Warbreaker is a fantasy novel. I think most of Sanderson's things are fantasy or fantasy adjacent. I think it was published in 2009 or so, and it was neat because it was available online. So it had a lot of input from his fans because he'd write chapter by chapter.
Oh,
and
wow.
then I think the subreddit or his website, something people would interact with it before he would release the next chapter. So it kind of got fan edited.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, and Sanderson has what we call the Sanderverse, but he calls it the Cosmere. So all of his worlds in the Cosmere are related. So there is the Mistborn series, Warbreaker, I can't think, crap, what's it called? I'm literally reading it right now.
Are you looking at your bookshelf?
I am looking at my bookshelf. I turned away to look at my bookshelf. It's the first book is called The Way of Kings, but the Stormlight Archive.
Okay.
The whole series.
These are cool titles.
Yeah, the Stormlight Archive. So they're all set in the Cosmere, and I think that means that they're all planets that are very close to each other, and there's an overarching story and reoccurring characters that'll pop up. And I definitely read these in the wrong order because a lot of people told me to start with Mistborn, and I went, no, I'm going with The Way of Kings first. And then I missed a lot of stuff because he's got this really funny character named Wit who I don't remember the term for it, but it's a world hopper where they go between worlds because they figured out how to...
Clint, the planeswalking janitor.
Yeah, exactly. And so they go between worlds because they have the ability and the magic functionally. It's called investiture in his world, where they can utilize the magic to jump between worlds. And it's implied that Wit is used to be a god or was a god at some point, and then he kind of walked away from some big event that we're still kind of trying to pick apart pieces to. So it's neat when you're reading through them and then you're like, oh, this is this character. So they pop up in other series. Warbreaker specifically is nice. It's a standalone and it's pretty quick read, and it's got a lot of intrigue and things. It's Game of Thrones-esque in that it is a lot of political nonsense between
yes,
a bunch of different factions vying for power, and then there's who's working for who and who's betraying who and things like that. Mm-hmm. So it starts off with two princesses from, I'm going to butcher these names, but Iridian, something like that. I
don't know, so you can say whatever you want.
You know, my my husband listens to the books and then I read them and then my brain just comes up with how to pronounce them and then Eric's like, what are you talking about? I'm like,
Like
isn't
when
it
I
this?
was reading Harry Potter, I didn't know how to say Hermione, so
Yeah.
I used to call her like Hermione or
I called
something.
her Hermione.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly like that.
Sorry, go on.
So there's Vivenna and her sister Ciri. And Vivenna's the older sister and Ciri's the younger sister. And before she was even born, Vivenna was contracted to be married to the God King. So in this world, I don't know the name of the world, but there's the two countries that we care about is Iridian and Haladrin. And there's a third kind of vague country that gets brought up but is not like the biggest political player right now because they're kind of like a subset of Haladrin because Haladrin conquered them. But Iridia is very much like a Malta situation where it's very small but they're able to defend their place and they have a lot of control of trade routes, so they have a lot of political power. And so the king of Iridia was able to negotiate, instead of getting his whole country taken over by Haladrin, that he would marry his first daughter to the God King. And
I mean, it kind of sounds like a win-win for everyone.
right. Well, so Haladrin does want to like take them over. And in this world, there's what's called the Returned, and it's like God's living among us. So if you die doing something godlike, you are given the chance to come back, and then you are treated as a god. And everyone has what they functionally call like a soul, but you can give it up to another person, and then that like amplifies your power, and then you see things. Color is very important in this world, so you see things better and brighter, and then you can, if you have so many of these people's soul, like a bunch of souls, like you become more and more powerful. And the Returned have their own, and then theoretically they have like a bunch of extra souls because they're given a soul sacrifice every week or some things, mostly so they can stay alive. But and there's a handful of them that exist at any one time, and then the God King is the king of all of them, and was before he was even born he had died, and then he gets returned. So it's like a stillborn, and then they get returned back, and that is the new king.
I see. Oh my goodness.
It's very complicated, but we'll get a little bit more into it. But first, Vivenna is like the good daughter who was raised to be like married to the God King, is supposed to be like the best wife. Like that's her entire life was training. She's very strict. She follows the rules, that kind of stuff. And Syria was kind of like the spare. So no one really cared about her. So she's kind of the wild child. And the day that I think it's like her 21st, 23rd birthday, some birthday, is when she would have to go to get married. And at the last minute, the king goes, yeah, but Vivenna's my favorite child, so I'm sending Ciri instead, because I don't really like Ciri. Vivenna is like a better kid. So, and then sends her off.
Oh no.
So Ciri is like, there's really early, it's really early on in the book, and she's like sitting in a cart just shocked that this is happening. Like, what? I was supposed to be the spare. Like, I'm not supposed to be important. I don't have training. I didn't pay attention to my tutors. I'm just the random girl.
Oh no.
Then they have a third sister, but the third sister...
is the God King even going to accept her?
So as long as it's a daughter, I don't like it's actually becomes like part of the ploy is like technically he followed the rules because he sent a daughter. He just didn't send the daughter they expected, and it actually becomes part of the like political issue with the people that help with the God King, because the God King's got a lot of attendants that more or less run the place. So there is some like they think that the king of Iridia is like this brilliant like tactician who sent Ciri because he knew that they were going to send spies to learn everything they could about Vivenna, but then he sent Ciri at the last second. So they thought it was this like crazy political move, but it really just was him playing favorites with his daughters.
Oh my gosh.
So Ciri goes in and is basically like ushered inside, and like there's like the inner sanctum where the god or the returned or the gods live, and then they each have their own like palace that's served by attendants who follow them, and there's like I think there's like 10 or 12 right now, because part of the thing that happens, I think it's daily or weekly, is that people will line up talking to the gods, asking them for a favor.
As you do.
As you do. But the thing is, the god will eventually grant a favor, and that'll be all of their biochromatic breath or their souls that they've accumulated, and then they move on again. So they die. So the gods
so it's like you're kind of...
You're asking the god to kill themselves for you.
Oh, wow. That's... intense.
It's a little intense. And
so they like pick who's the worthiest favor to grant, basically?
Yeah. And so gods are only really alive for like 5-6 years. It's unusual for them to be older than 10 years old because eventually they pick someone.
Okay.
And right now it's been about 4 years since a god has given up their life for a human or for a mortal to heal them of a curse or something like that. And so that's another issue, is that a lot of people are still like asking for favors every day, not expecting to get it, because basically if they say no, they've condemned them, because most of the time people coming to the gods are like on death's doorstep or their kids on death's doorstep. And then there's a worry that if they don't say yes, then they lose the power of, well, the gods are saying no, right? So there's some of that going on as well.
So this is a lot of political intrigue.
There's a lot of political. It was so good. It was so fascinating. I was so into it. So Ciri spends, I think, the first week alone getting like prepped and scrubbed and dressed up and all that.
This is not surgery. What are you talking about?
There's like a huge scene with her getting into a bath for the first time with like a bunch of servants and stuff. And
I'm sorry.
They like cleaning her because she's like a grimy little gremlin who lives out in the farms most of the time because she's used to not being important. And
my God.
She's fairly dirty. And so she
couldn't have cleaned up at her own castle before being shipped off.
I'm sure she was, but like they're making an extra show of it because she's going to be the God King's wife, right?
Okay.
And then
Fair.
She's getting all these orders, like you can't talk to him, you can't look at him directly in the eye, you're just going to go into the room and you're going to have a child with him, and that's your only purpose. And they call her the vessel. And so she's getting like scared out of her mind for about a week, getting prepped to become the God King's wife. Vivenna, partially because she's been used to being super important and then all of a sudden she's no longer important, and partially because she hates the fact that her dad just shipped off her kid sister instead, sneaks out with a old friend of hers to go to the city where Ciri got shipped so that she can save her and then either replace herself with Ciri or get them both out of the city. She hasn't really thought that far ahead, but her first goal is to meet, there's a spy in Haladrin named Lemex, and so her first goal is just to meet one of the city spies and then kind of come up with a plan from there. And so she gets into the city a couple days after Ciri does, and she meets the spy, but he is like literally dying, probably been poisoned. And so he gives her a large sum of biochromatic breath right as he's dying. And she doesn't want it, but she also doesn't want to waste it, because if you die with it, it just goes back into the ether, and then it's this big valuable resource. But the Iridians also believe that you should only have your one breath, and that if you take other people's breath, you're a monster or you're a sinner. Like, Haladrin's way more lax about sharing breath and like using it as a source of income, where Iridian's like, no, that's your soul, and you just sold your soul. So she's got this like moral quandary of she has all this stuff, but it's also making her really powerful, and that she can do what's called like animating things, where she can like turn like you can tell the robe to do simple commands like protect you or like help you climb or like make you stronger. So like it's a good tool to have, especially when you're trying to infiltrate a city.
Yeah.
And she meets up with Denth and Tonkfa, who were mercenaries that were working under Lemex. And they convince her like, hey, so Lemex was dying, you should take the breath and then we'll take care of you and we'll help you out because we were here working for him, and now that he's dead we don't really have an employer and you have all access to all this funds, so you can just pay us instead. And so she, not really having any other allies other than the friend that she took with her, she goes, okay, let's do it. So she starts to work with them, and Denth kind of sets her up to show the Haladrin people. So there's Iridians in Haladrin that have come there for various reasons to try to like make an uprising. And so they more or less do like guerrilla warfare on like various people. Like they attack a priest at one point, they kidnap a girl. Like it's rather aggressive. And Vivenna's not super keen on it, but she also is very young and naive and doesn't quite understand. And so she's kind of just going along with it, and Denth is kind of making a lot of the decisions. Going back to Ciri, she finally has to go in to the chamber where she's going to meet the God King. And she's like, isn't there going to be a ceremony? And they're like, no, the God King said you're married, and now you're married. And that's it.
Oh.
Yeah. And that's her response, too. It's just like, okay. And so they go, okay, go in, take your clothes off, don't look at him, and then make a baby. And she's like, I'm a child. Like, she's 18, but she's like, what? And so she goes in there, and he's sitting in a chair. It's really dark in the room, and then nothing happens. And they just sit there all night. And then she gets up, she puts her clothes back on, and then she leaves. And this goes on for a while. And like every night is Ciri going, and then realizing that he's just sitting there and not doing anything. And then he gets up and leaves eventually. Okay. And so she's just like, what the heck is going on? Like, I thought he would do something. So Ciri, being a little bit pig-headed, finally gives up, and she's like, no, I'm not sitting on the floor waiting for you to deal with this. I'm going to go to the bed. And so she looks him dead in the eye, and he's just kind of staring at her, and then she goes and sleeps in the bed instead. And he seems to be intrigued by her, and she's just a little confused. And as they continue, Ciri learns that the God King had his tongue cut out as a baby because he has so much power that he could accidentally command something and then cause like a whole nuclear war functionally.
Oh my God.
While he was growing up. So this happens to every God King. So she starts to realize that he has been so sheltered and so controlled by his priests that he doesn't have any concept of the outside world. He's just been built up as this figurehead, but he has no real education. And the only thing he has is this children's storybook that he smuggled in away from his priests that his mom used to read to him before she passed away. And it's their first like touch point of Ciri realizing that he is not as old as like mature as she thought he was. Mm-hmm. And so she starts reading to him. She starts teaching him to read. She smuggles in like I think it's like a chalkboard and starts teaching him to write so he can talk to her. And so every night she pretends that they have sex to satisfy the priests who are clearly listening in on her. And then by like making noises and jumping on the bed for a little bit. And then she goes back to teaching the God King things. His name is Susebron, and he's the goodest boy. I love him. Susebron, yeah.
Oh my God.
I love him so much. He's such a good egg. He wants to be like the knights and stuff in the stories and thinks everyone is good. And then when he realizes everyone's not good, he's like, I'm going to make it. I'm going to make the world better.
Oh my God.
He's just a good egg. I love him so much.
Good boy.
And then we go...
But, like, he's really not in charge so much.
Right, yeah. So he doesn't have... He's literally a figurehead. And he basically holds a hoard of breath. And it was a gift from an old god the first God King, who collected so much breath that it would be awful to send it off. One of the 5 scholars, I think, it's like the original 5 who figured out biochromatic breath and stuff like that. But we learn that eventually that he is like just the vessel to hold that treasure, because they don't want anyone to get a hold of it and they don't want it to go to waste. And that's basically what the God King's position is just to hold all of that power and then pass it on in case like a indestructible force comes and tries to take over the city, because there's always like this vague apocalyptic hint that something's coming eventually, so they don't want to get rid of the breath.
Right. Okay.
So we go back to Vivenna. There's also one of the gods. His name is Lightsong. He, part of the things with the returned is that they don't remember who they were before they returned. And so they just wake up and then they know like basic stuff, but like their whole past, they don't really know. And Lightsong is kind of unorthodox because like there's other gods like Blushweaver and things like that who are very into like the political intrigue, and Lightsong's like, I'm useless and I just want to sit here and be fed grapes and get drunk, and that's all I want to do, and I am not as good of an egg as people think I am. I don't know why you like me. I'm not doing it. And his servant, so every returned has a like priest that's like their right hand man kind of, and his kind of loves him in that like he's like, all right, cool, and then just chills, and like he's very formal and official when other people are by, but like the second people leave he's like, all right, cool, and then he like takes off his important robe and then he chills with Lightsong. And there's a couple of scenes that like hint that I don't know how to say his name, but I think it's Yamar. But his priest like knew him in the past life, and Lightsong starts to like poke at it. He's like, no, you knew me. Why did you know me? Like, what are we to each other? And then his priest gets like really cagey and like, no, it's fine. And so Lightsong, everyone thinks Lightsong's like this great being because he has such a worldview, but Lightsong is like, I'm just some schmuck. Like, I don't even believe in the pantheon that I'm supposedly a god for. This seems ridiculous. And he starts to uncover like a secondary plot of the city that was kind of off to the side that got taken over by Haladrin. Like other people are trying to infiltrate the castle and more or less like steal the God King's powers. So he's kind of like the B plot going on. Vivenna back in the city with Denth and Tonkfa are working more and more to like supposedly mess up Haladrin to make it easier for Idris to like win a war in case it turns into a war. And Vivenna, her friend disappears for a little bit, and then she's kidnapped by another player in the game known as Vasher. And Vasher has a lot of breath, and he is more or less known to be like either like an assassin or something like that. He's always like in the shadows. He has a sword called Nightblood, and Nightblood is my favorite. Nightblood was an experiment by one of the 5 scholars of what happens when you put a bunch of breath into an inanimate object, because you can't put it into inanimate objects that aren't like related to like an organic material. And so they tried to put a bunch into a sword to make it a holy sword, and they told it to kill evil. And that was its command, but they didn't tell it what evil was. So Nightblood is convinced basically everything is evil.
Oh, no.
And he's this little like murder gremlin that always wants to be taken out of his sheath and then just get and like mess stuff up, because he's like, can we kill evil now? Can we murder evil now? And Vasher actually uses him, and it's my favorite. He just throws the sword out into like a group of guards, and then the guards are like, what is the sword? And they pick it up, and then Nightblood will be like, kill evil evil. And then the guards will kill each other because they're influenced by Nightblood's power.
Oh, okay. So like he doesn't move himself.
No, but he will take over your mind. He's like an awakened object, and he will just take over your mind and make you just believe him. And then he'll be like, that guy's evil because he stole your cookies or something like that. And then you're like, and then Vasher doesn't have to fight anyone because he can just throw the sword in, wait for them to all kill each other, and then he takes the sword back because he never takes the sword out of his sheath.
I see.
And they just have a constant banter going on. So Vasher has to deal with the sword. And I love Nightblood. He's trying. He just doesn't understand.
He's just a sword. He doesn't know what real good and bad is.
He doesn't understand morals. He's just a sentient sword who's doing his best. But so Vasher recognizes Vivenna and what Vivenna might become and the issues that she's bringing up, because Denth and Tonkfa are actually using her, and they've more or less kidnapped her, but without her knowing she's been kidnapped. And so they've been utilizing her, being like, look, I'm the princess of Iridia, because all Iridian princesses can change their hair color at will, because they have some connection to the biochromatic breath that's not really explained. But it's a way to be like, look, I'm a princess. And so then Vasher's trying to get her away from Denth and Tonkfa because they used to be friends, Vasher and Denth, but then he had to kill one of their, I think it's Denth's brother. They got into a fight because it turns out that Vasher, Denth, the girl that, or the sister of Denth and the brother of Denth were the five scholars originally, and and so they have this whole like background, and Denth is convinced that Vasher couldn't have bested his brother because his brother was like the best swordsman ever, and he's like, I don't understand how you won. So that's like a constant like battle between them. And so Vasher tries to kidnap Vivenna to get her away from Denth because Denth is not a good guy. And Vivenna gets back, but then discovers that they killed her childhood friend because they thought Vasher had, like, convinced her that they were bad people, and which is true, but they were like, oh, we're no longer putting up a guise. So then she runs away and hides in the slums for a couple of weeks, and ends up taking, because when you have a lot of biochromatic breath, you can recognize other people with it. So she puts it all into like a shawl that she wears, and
a sentient shawl,
more or less. And so she's stuck there, but she does eventually Vasher eventually finds her, and then they start to undo the damage that she had accidentally done with Denth. And Vivenna, Vasher's kind of like an old curmudgeon who's seen a lot of crap in his life, and Vivenna like slowly wears him down like the daughter he never had. Aww. And so they have this relationship as it builds, and so she eventually convinces him to help her save Ciri and the God King and figure out the plot behind there. And as they're going to go and help Ciri, Vasher gets kidnapped by Denth. So Vivenna goes to save him. And then she gets him out of the chains that he was tied up in. And he goes, all right, run, get out of here, because Denth is going to kill you, and he's a better swordsman than I am. And Denth is like, I told you, so I don't understand how you beat my brother. And then Vasher goes like this, and he gives him all of his biochromatic breath, because you can only give it in like either a half or the whole thing. And it's this moment of like overwhelming power that comes into you, so it pauses you for a second, and then he cuts him down. And it's like the coolest scene, because like you wouldn't expect someone to give away something so valuable, but it's such a cool party trick to be like, this is how I won. Then
wait, so then he doesn't get it back though, right?
Right. But Vasher was originally one of the returned, and kind of was starting to figure out a lot of stuff going on, and they caused a lot of problems with the government, because him and the five scholars were basically trying to like build up Haladrin and do experiments that led to night blood, that led to what's called lifeless soldiers, who
Zombies?
More or less, yeah. Zombies again for me. But they're commanded by like voice commands, but so he is coming back to undo all of that. And he is actually, when he was the Returned, he was Warbreaker, so that's the title of the book. And so then he helps Vivenna go to rescue Ciri. The God King, Lightsong, and Blushweaver, one of the other Returned, who has a lot of political power, are kidnapped by a cult of people from the other country that Haladrin controls. And Lightsong discovers that his priest used to be his brother, or is his brother, and he had saved his brother, or so his niece, his brother's sister, or his brother's daughter, while they were on a boat, and she had fallen overboard, and he dove in to save her, and he saved her, but he perished in the process, and that's why his brother became his priest, and that's why he believes in him as a god. And so Lightsong has this really cute moment, and it cracks me up because it's such a brother, like, having a sibling relationship, because they're kidnapped and put in jail, and Yalmar is like, even when you don't remember me, we end up in jail. And so it, like, brings up, like, this, like, clearly they had this kind of relationship even when Lightsong remembered who he was.
Oh, no.
But, so I think they're called the Paul Call or something like that. Pan Call, regardless. The other country is going to kill the God King and get his power. And Lightsong uses his blessing to give the God King back his tongue. So that's how Lightsong sacrifices himself for Susebron. And Susebron is able to say, or like stop everything. He rescues Ciri from the cultists as well. Vivenna and Ciri get to be reunited. He stops basically the war between Haladrin and Iridia from happening, and then is going, and like everything's looking bright at the end, and he's like, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to undo the mistakes that Vasher made. And then it kind of ends with Vasher asking if Vivenna needs a like an escort back to her hometown, and she's like, no, I'm coming with you. This was way more fun than being a princess. I'm gonna ride with you, and you're gonna teach me how to fight with a sword. And he's like, okay, I guess. And she's like, you're just grumpy. And he's like, oh, okay, whatever. And then it's like that cute little moment as like they're walking off into the sunset, and it's so good. And that's Warbreaker.
Hooray!
Yeah, but
that's very good.
It's very good. It's one of his shorter books because God
dang. Really?
Yeah, God dang if Brandon Sanderson can just write forever. And it's nice because it's a one-off book too, so it's a nice intro to him without having to go, because like Mistborn is a trilogy, but there's 3 trilogies in Mistborn's like universe.
What?
Yeah, and then Way of Kings, the Stormlight Archive, each book is like 1,000 or 1,500 pages, and there's like 5 of them right now. So it's quite a doorstop. So as an intro to Sanderson, it's a really good first book to read by him because you don't have to commit to the rest of it.
Okay. I see. Mm-hmm. Well, it does sound good. It sounds maybe a bit confusing, but
it makes more sense than when I'm just spewing out, and then this guy, and then this guy, because it changes POV a lot.
Okay.
And so then when you're following that person, things make more sense.
Yeah. I mean, also, it does kind of seem like Game of Thrones, where it's just like, you got to kind of keep up with like the characters and like what's happening with each subset.
Whose loyalty is where, and so it's fun. And it is very much is like a more condensed Game of Thrones, because there's like a bunch of different players going at each other and fighting for control of this big power. And there's also the like looming something's going to happen. That's always like winter is coming.
Yes. More zombies. You definitely could have bought Game of Thrones, got your kings and your zombies all at once.
Kings and zombies. Game of Thrones will come eventually. I'm just currently...
I'm sure it will. We're waiting for the right time.
All right. Would you like the quote again?
Please.
All right. From the ashes a fire shall be woken, a light from the shadow shall spring. Renewed shall be the blade that was broken, the crownless again shall be king.
Okay, so I thought maybe I knew where it was from, but I actually don't think I do. Is it a song?
No, it is from something you've talked about previously on the podcast.
Really? Oh God, I should know it then.
I'm going to give you...
Hold on. Let me think.
Do you want a hint?
Yes, please.
I'm going to tell you Liv Tyler.
Oh, okay. Oh my goodness. Wait, it must be from Lord of the Rings then.
Yep, it's from Return of the Queen.
Yeah.
Arwen says it.
Okay. Jeez, I feel bad for not remembering one of my favorite not genres. Pieces, whatever. You know what I mean. I should have known.
Pieces of media, yeah. It's all good.
My media.
I don't know that I would have, like, just the cadence of it, I probably would have picked Lord of the Rings had I not, like, looked it up myself, but I was also like, this feels right for this quote.
Yeah, it's good. Now, we definitely could bring Lord of the Rings for king or kitchen as well, if I hadn't already talked extensively.
Yeah, that's very true. Okay.
Ooh, maybe I could bring The Hobbit instead.
Ooh,
I'm sorry, I need to stop interrupting.
Me just trying to end the podcast over here. The generator's going to be real mad that we keep interrupting.
Yeah.
Generator, what is our next word?
The next word is kitchen.
It's kitchen. In the kitchen. All right.
In the kitchen.
In the kitchen.
You know what? I'm about to be in the kitchen. I'm hungry.
Same. Oh my goodness. All right. So, because Allison and I both need to eat something, thanks for listening to our podcast. We appreciate you making it to the end of the episode. And thanks, Generator, for giving us a beautiful word. And if you like this podcast, please share it with a friend so that if you share with a friend and then another friend will share it with their friend and it'll just keep growing. And then...
Hey, wait, I have a quick story.
Okay.
I actually did share it with a friend.
Yeah.
Shout out to Alyssa if you're listening to this. It's a different Alyssa than you know, actually, though. New Alyssa. Yeah, I shared it, and she said she started listening.
Yay!
So she's like way behind this episode, but when you catch up finally.
Welcome.
Okay, anyway,
yeah, so share with a friend so that more friends can listen and we can grow as a podcast.
Hooray!
And that's the end. As always, I've been Stephanie.
And I've always been Allison.
And this is still not a pyramid scheme nor a mob plan or something like that.
Regardless what anybody ever tells you.
Yeah, don't listen to them. Just listen to us. We're your friends.
Listen to us. Goodbye.